Awesome.
Yeah, there we go.
So we're recording now,
Okay.
and we are talking to Bobby Magee Lopez, muralist in Denver, Colorado. And hi, Bobby.
Hi. Good to
Thank you
see you
so.
today, Neena.
You too. Thank you so much for joining. And today we're going to get to know about you, your vision, your art, and anything you'd like to share. And Bobby is also one of the participants of the community gathering that we had last June in 2021. And hopefully we'll be back again at the next one that we want to have, probably around the same time at probably the same venue. So just letting you know that up front, Bobby.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it was a great choice, and obviously it was important to a lot of people. And I think that's also a big reason why there was such a community gathering.
Mhm. Yes, yes, cool. So, speaking of that gathering, what do you think brought us together? Meaning, what what do you think? Either cosmically, practically, or whatever way you would like to describe that.
Well, pragmatically, I think it was because of my involvement in some other Chicano related events that you found my name. And then when you reached out, I found that we just had a really good conversation. I felt that you were really open and very interested in hearing all different sides of the conversation. So that's one aspect. But also, I just think that there is a need for these conversations, whether it be the Chicano movements or the Black Lives Matter movements, just the people of color movements in general, and how the communities at large relate to both the artistic movement of the area and the public art that's being curated in those areas.
Why did you want to be at the community gathering? And how does that event relate to your mission and vision?
Yeah, I wanted to be there to see who was a participant in the conversation. I mean, without these events, we don't really know, what voices we need to pay attention to and who's really committed to being part of that movement. Um, I also wanted to share, some of my successes and experiences, as well as some of my concerns that I've seen, and talk a little bit about the resistance. As far as my overall vision, I just like the idea of being able to participate in communities at large, curating really successful artworks that create a very profound sense of place, but also that the communities take ownership over because they had some sort of say in what that looks like, whether it be just through community gatherings like this or directly through a curated process.
Okay, so could you describe a little bit more what you mean by that as far as a curated process?
Well, generally, the calls for murals that I've done have either been a private owner or a community that's gotten together and decided that they want to do something.
Mhm,
So in those cases, there's a jury that's put together that makes all the final decisions on what the artwork will be in
mhm.
terms of location, imagery, and narrative.
And how have you felt about being part of those events or those projects?
Those are always great because they give me so many different ideas to bounce off. Instead of just being in my own world and in my own head about my creative ideas, I have different perspectives and different stories that I can
Mhm.
work with to create something that feels a lot more relatable on a whole, between myself and the people who are curating the artwork.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I may be jumping a little bit ahead here, but you were speaking a little bit about narratives right now. And even at the event, when you spoke at the event, you said something really powerful, which is so you spoke after a few people talked about the feeling of alienation and the feeling of isolation and sort of like not being recognized for their work after it gets erased. And when you spoke, you said, what if we create a narrative that we can all be a part of? And that was inspiring for me and for a lot of people that were there. And I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about that statement that you made.
Sure. I mean, I think that the artistic definition would be creating some sort of imagery that would represent a narrative that everybody cumulatively agreed upon.
Yeah.
But also, in a deeper sense, creating a system narrative by which we can accomplish greater goals artistically in communities and cities. So instead of just putting up murals with the imagery that we like and then hoping that it sticks around, we need to dig deeper into the systems and the programs that allow for the longevity of these narratives,
Hmm.
these mural projects. And so getting involved with the powers that be, so to speak, the Denver arts and venues and
Hmm.
the different art districts that are essentially created to ensure that these projects are well done, that they do speak to the community at large.
Hmm.
Those are the projects and communities and people that we need to align ourselves with. So that way we don't run into a lot of the problems that you have when you do see redevelopment in historical areas.
So were you able to listen to the artist that spoke about the bridge project that's going on in Globeville, the Sun and Moon Bridge project?
I'm not familiar with it, no.
Okay, well, I am going to try to connect
There
you
is
to.
this
I might
bridge.
have a project going on that seems to encompass a lot of what you were talking about. And it seems like people are very excited about it. I really want to know how that will I mean, I really want to know how it impacts long term and create that longevity like you said. And I also want to know about some of the projects that you have done that you feel like sort of embody that feeling of this is really collaborative. This is probably, got a lot of support around it. Can you tell me about some of the projects that you've done that you feel really good about?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most recent projects that I completed was the Wild Urban Medicine, and that one was a group project that was outlined, curated by a private organization that wanted to rebrand their residential community, but they wanted it to be educational at its core. And so we talked to the community, the citizens that lived in that community, and talked to them a lot about what was important to them. And one of the themes that they had come up with was just kind of this idea of sustainability of plants and flowers and the local surroundings. So we did some research on what was in the area, and we opted to highlight the native weed species that exists in that area and grows in that area. And some of the people that were living in that community are refugees and people from countries like Ghana, Bhutan, some Southern African countries. So they have different perspectives on the types of herbs and medicinal uses for weeds and plants in general. So we
Mhm.
integrated some of their philosophies in that and shows some of the native species of weeds that they could potentially use in their brews and other sort of holistic medicinal uses. So again, the project called Wild Urban Medicine is um, a conceptual collaboration with that community. But then toward the end, when they started to see how the entire project was developing and sort of understood that we were creating these macroscopic versions of tiny little plants so that they could identify them more easily in the area and descriptions of what those plants could do. Then we brought in all of their kids and their friends so we could teach them a little bit about how to paint the mural and talk to them about what the idea was behind it. So that was pretty nice because that felt like a full circle project, from, meeting with the citizens to actually talking with them about, what was important to them and what they might like on the buildings that they look at every day, and then being able to cultivate like a really rich plan and idea to elaborate that, and then bringing in the youth to help finish the project up and teach them a little bit about, what the adults had come up with as a plan. So
Wow.
those are really fulfilling because they bring together all these different aspects of what art can do. I love all these murals and art for art's sake, but when you can really bring together all of those things to make it and give it ownership to the community, that's when I feel like we're heading in a really profound direction in terms of public art and just where art is going in general.
Yeah. It's so regenerative too, because like by teaching the youth what's going on, then they have stories to tell later too. And they can continue on that whole thing. That just sounds incredible. Where is that?
That project is off Colfax and Harlan over near Casa Bonita.
Oh, okay. On the west
And
side.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I go over there pretty regularly and I still run into the kids that helped on the project, and because I'll do other mural projects over there and they'll stop by and say hi. So
That's awesome.
I also think that's important because to see a working artist that kids know,
Yeah,
just it plants that seed early, and to keep reinforcing that there are creatives out here doing what they love, making a living doing what they love, is a really important part of being in communication with those kids early on.
definitely. So how long do you think that project really took from like conception all the way to completion?
Well, I could say like the painting part of it was like 5 weeks.
Mm,
The design probably took another 4 weeks, but that's not necessarily full time. I mean, I point that out because we can do a lot of good in a very short amount of time.
yeah. I
Given
mean,
the
I
right
was thinking
parameters.
months or years earlier when you described it.
No, no. I mean, really, it was like truly about, if I was just looking at the hours added up, it was probably like full time for 1 week between my partner and I to design the project. So like 80 hours of work there, 80 to 100 hours of work there, and then our crew that was actually painting. And then that's also working in like days off and like rain delays and things like that. So, I mean, in a month, we were able to knock that project out. And that's like 10,000 square feet of original.
Wow.
It's between like 2 or 3 city blocks because it's a pretty big community.
That is
Right in the
awesome.
center.
So
Yeah.
how did what started the whole like idea? Like what came up and how did that whole thing like just spark?
That was a call for entry. It was a project
Oh,
that the 40 West Arts District had curated, and they invited 5 artists in particular to put together something because they knew that we had the experience for that scope of a project and the skill level to design something that was going to feel very sophisticated when it was finished.
that's exciting. I can't wait to go see it.
Yeah,
You
it's great.
probably
You could see it when you're driving by. I mean, we made sure that we faced most of the wall murals, even though some wrap around the corners outward. So anybody driving by it'll catch their eye very easily.
okay, that's amazing. Are there any other projects that you're doing that you would like to tell us about?
I have so many projects going on. I
Maybe
think
like a couple of your favorites or something that you feel really relates to community art.
um I've got just some concepts in mind in terms of the space that I currently occupy. I've got a studio and gallery space over off of Broadway and I-25, and I've been here for 1 year, and I have I've been teaching workshops here. I have been doing a lot of new studio work here, and I've still got a lot of square footage that I am expanding into. So um, I've been working on different ways to work with my artists community by bringing in artists, showing them what I do, working collaboratively with them on some of their ideas, and also offering housing. I've had the opportunity to um, both rent and volunteer some rooms that I have set up for traveling artists. So
Wow.
that's been a pretty fun process, getting to know some new people through that, and looking at ways to utilize the rest of the space here, this 18,000 square foot of space, in a very creative way.
Wow.
I'm looking at some, immersive and interactive projection mapping mural projects within the other spaces, and also building out some studio space for artists when they are ready to take on their own um, projects, outside of their home.
Yeah, what an amazing vision. Do you have any events that you do there?
Yeah, the most recent one we just hosted was an album release party for a local Denver band, and they do pretty artistic, sort of immersive mood music. So it's not like your standard rock band, but definitely creating something a little bit more collaborative between like visual art and music and immersive spaces. So I can see this, this building being used for more projects like that, as the immersive and interactive art scene becomes bigger and bigger, and people want more of that kind of experience, whether it be 3D virtual reality Oculus type things, or completely projected immersive um, environments.
That sounds amazing. I mean, wow. Do you have a name for the space?
It's called the Dream Lab.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, you can come by any time, Nina, and just take a tour of the space now.
maybe I'll
It
do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much set up to be like a staging gallery in my artist's studio workshop. So this is just where you can come see the works that I have in process, and also, any of the work that is finished that I'm putting up on the walls, just to kind of see what it looks like in gallery space.
All right, yeah. Cool. So you already pretty much talked about this, but if you have anything else to say, I have two questions. One is, how do you serve the community? And the other one is, what are you offering the community? They're just slightly different. So I was wondering if you could talk about either one of those or both of them together.
Yeah, I think that the service of public art is really the umbrella that I work under. And each time I paint a mural, I essentially transform a space. And that's what's really drawn me to mural painting before I even truly knew why I loved it so much, was that I could essentially create an entirely different environment just with the imagery. I didn't have
Mhm.
to build a park or install a huge sculpture or, spend years planning out something to build a chapel. I could just paint a wall and people would gather there and they'll take pictures there and they'll tell their friends about it and they'll come up with creative things to do in front of it, whether it's their own version of a creative performance or interacting with the mural or the artwork in a way I hadn't expected. That was always really fun for me. And I think that taking that and extrapolating it into kind of these ideas of immersive environments is essentially taking that one wall mural concept and turning it into all the walls, all the floor, and the ceiling all around you, and making that something special for people to get in there and really feel like they can interact with that environment even more than just a single mural.
Okay, so and then what do you feel you're offering the community?
I think I offer the chance to have a transformational experience, just even by default. If you're just walking by a mural and then all of a sudden it changes your day, that's a huge positive. That can turn people's day around. I really realize that while I'm painting these murals, how important these things are to the community, especially when they've been there a while. This last project that I worked on over near Colfax as well, I had painted one of my very first big murals, and it was time to repaint it, do something a little different, freshen it up. And when I painted over it, just like the base color, a lot of people were really upset about it. They thought it was going away.
Oh, wow.
And so a lot of people came up to me and they were checking in just to see what was going on and what I had in mind for the new mural. And so I got to engage like people that had been there for a long time, but also people that walked by there on a daily basis or had just moved to the area and loved all the artwork in the area. And so a lot of them kept track of me and made sure that I made good on my plan to paint a new mural. And everybody loves the new piece because it's very similar to the old piece. It's a completely different design, but it pays homage to the first work that I did when I first launched my mural career out here. So it's been real fun to see that change, and to see how people react to it and really understand from an artist perspective that these these blank walls can kind of just be drab, and when the artwork goes up they don't ever want it to go away. So um, you know offering sort of a ray of sunshine maybe in an area that may not otherwise have that is
Yeah.
part of my service to community. But also just being available. I love when the circumstances are right. I love talking to anybody who's really truly interested about the art, wants to know how it's made, how long it takes, how long the design process is, do I work with other people, and that gives me an opportunity to also refer out other artists that I know, because sometimes people will ask me to commission work and I'll let them know that I know artists that are better at that particular thing than I am, and sometimes when I'm working with artists, they get a chance to interact. So it just spreads, the whole artistic realm around the city because the new projects get envisioned and executed, and people get inspired and maybe they want to come out and help. And that's not as common, but every once in a while I get just somebody randomly walking by and then they'll show back up with their paint clothes on and want to help.
Yeah. So I have a couple things that I thought of while you were talking. One is that when I worked at Escuela Tlatelolco, I was surrounded by art, and I worked in that school for several years. And when it closed down in 2017, the first, like it just closed down and it was just over. And that's the place where we had the event
Mhm.
at Nurture Denver. It used to be the school. And it was so, I mean, the worst part for me was really not being around art anymore. Like we were surrounded by it. So like first thing, you look at the mural, you walk in the door, inside all the walls were filled with art. And, just to like have that be part of my life on a daily basis for 8 to 10 or 12 hours a day made such a big impression on me. So I completely resonate with what you're saying as far as how a space can change a person's life. It can just make you feel like you're in a different world because the whole school was all about the Chicano movement. So all of the art, pictures, and everything just really brought you there. It was like so retro. So when
Mhm.
I walked in there, I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm in this like completely different space. And then I wasn't even conscious that I was. It just that I was.
Mhm.
And so the work I did was like, yeah, we're in it. We're just all in it. So what you said was super powerful and made a lot of sense to me about how you can transform a space by the art. And I'm really thankful that
Yeah.
you're doing that.
Yeah, and it's what I've really seen too is kind of when we did that wild urban medicine project, what I really saw was how an entire area can be transformed.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
See, what you're seeing a lot of, and this is kind of touching on our earlier conversation about like communities and making sure that the artwork has longevity. You're seeing a real big surge with public art and murals in particular, and how quickly they can transform an area. And it's been great to see different art communities or art organizations bring in a bunch of different artists. And I think that's been a really good way to get people involved with different artists, different styles of art, um, and bring a lot of diversity to a community.
Hmm.
But when you think about like the way an art show is curated in an art gallery and how that experience really gets you to dive a little bit even deeper into maybe one or two artists instead of a bunch of different artists,
Hmm.
because you get to see multiple works by those artists,
Hmm.
and then taking that idea into the mural community and public art community and developing something like we did with Wild Urban Medicine, where it's essentially 10 new works all in a similar style that you got to see us develop. And that feels a lot more cohesive for a project like this, where it's all one community, and it feels like it brings all of those buildings and all of those people in those buildings together and creates a larger space. Whereas it was just kind of parking lots and sidewalks. Now it kind of feels like a huge art gallery as you walk
Wow.
around your community.
And I imagine they're plants, right? The pictures, the murals are pictures of plants.
They're paintings. Yeah, they're all
Yeah.
paintings of
Right.
plants.
Well, that's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
your paintings of plants.
Mhm.
So you're also elevating the plant world into where it needs to be anyway. Like according to natives and people that use plants as medicine, that's a known. But I think for modern world, it's not appreciated as much. So that you're bringing that back up, you're elevating plant medicine back up to where it needs to be.
Yes, both figuratively and literally, because
Hmm.
there's such large paintings that we're just these tiny little insects essentially to these
Yeah.
enormous pieces. So just seeing a different scale makes you feel differently about them. And whereas you might walk by a little tiny weed and not realize that it actually has a flower on it because it's so small to see. You'll go to this mural and you'll see the flowers that do stem off of them and how beautiful they are, and how they are really important for the pollination of everything else that goes on in our native environment. Because weeds aren't weeds get a bad rap. They're there for a reason. They're not all nuisance.
And
you
they
know
outlive a lot of other plants.
they do. They're very resilient, and that's one of the things that we wanted to really put forth, is that these are some of the toughest plants
Mhm.
we have. We keep squirting them and pulling them and they just come right back.
Yeah, they do. They
Yeah.
sure do. Yeah, which is how do you want people in the community to engage with your work? Do you have anything else to say about that?
I mean, just continuing doing what they're doing. I love social media for the aspect that they can share with other people their love for art,
Mhm.
and also elevate the artists who they're sharing art with, myself included. So that way we can continue to make more art, because knowing that people are interacting, seeing documentation of that, and knowing that they're enjoying it just really inspires us as artists to keep doing the same thing, and
Mhm.
just painting more walls. Um, so I would say that for now. And then as I continue to develop these concepts and new environments and new works of art in the Dream Lab, definitely bringing people in the fold there, um, and seeing how that will kind of change their view on what's possible with mural art, you know,
Mhm.
and how bringing in new forms of technology can actually elevate both the mural painting process, but also people's individual experience with it.
Right. Yeah. So besides the two projects that you mentioned, the Dream Lab and then
Wild urban medicine.
Wild Urban Medicine Project on approximately Colfax and Harlan, do you have any other pieces that you could tell me about that we could go look at that you are really proud of that you've done?
I would refer you to my website and to my
Oh,
Instagram because there's so many. There's probably one in your neighborhood if you live in Denver or any surrounding areas or even cities.
that is
And,
so cool.
yeah, at BobbyMcGeeLopez.com, there is an interactive mural map. So you can get on there and it'll show you all the locations, give you the address, and a little description of each of the artworks.
Okay, thank you. Well, the last one I have on here are collaboration ideas. What do you see for our future together in terms of collaboration?
Yeah, I think the most beneficial part of our relationship so far is to have dialogue. This intentional dialogue around these issues is where it all kind of starts for me in my heart. Because then once I have some time to hear people, that inevitably works its way into the overall purpose of what I make art for. So that's just an integrative process of you know, being a better human being, being more aware of others. And then in terms of the community, I think that, finding some common language to describe everybody's intentions, and finding out a little bit more deeply, what everybody wants to do with their art. Like we've had this interview and you have an idea of what my intentions are, but um, getting artists in the same room to find out what their purpose is. Maybe they don't want to make careers out of it. Maybe they just want to do two or three big pieces that that are in their community, or maybe they want to connect artists together, or some other version of the creative process. So that way we're not assuming that we're all doing the same thing, and we're finding those areas where we can team up and do the things that we really love to make these projects better and last longer and be more inclusive.
Yeah. Well, one thing I noticed is that not everybody knew each other. That was a misassumption I made. And that, I think that the gathering for me provides an opportunity to bring people together, like you said, in ways that are innovative and forward thinking. I know that like some of the youth that were there were a few students from the Escuela that were at the gathering, and they since then have been really inspired to make art, just by being around people who do that and make art and different merch and everything. There's actually a collaborative painting going around right now. um, I don't know if you had a chance to see him, but he was standing towards the entrance of Nurture Denver and making like this. He was sort of doing a live painting.
Mhm.
He was one of the students at Escuela, and what we'd like to do is have other people contribute to that painting, people from the event. So it's going around right now. It's called the Mask of Tlaloc. So he started it, and I think that for him to have that level of leadership so early on, and be around people who are so inspiring like yourself, um, is so good for people like that.
That
He
sounds like a
said,
fun project. is it
yeah.
is it there at Nurture right now?
Well, so the plan is once everyone's finished contributing to that painting, they will hang it at Nurture Denver and put a plaque there representing our gathering, and then also the students of Escuela that pretty much brought all that spiritual energy into that building.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things I want to touch on, which might get us off track of the interview a little bit, though, is I think that one of the things that I heard there was some contention about the development of the school, and the capitalistic idea that you can just kind of like come into a culturally rich space and just kind of erase everything and then put whatever you want up there because that's what the new market calls for.
Right.
And so I think that building in from the ground up ways to preserve um, culturally diverse um, there's so many different things that make a neighborhood what it is, but being able to preserve those things, whatever that particular community sees as important, you know, for some communities it might be murals. For some communities it might be the names of the streets. For some communities it might be the type of architecture that either exists or is allowed to be built there. But being able to build from the ground up programs that take that into consideration before the inevitability of change occurs, and essentially creating ethical development and ethical redevelopment through that process, recognizing the heritages that made that what it is and preserving it so that it doesn't lose its soul. Because I think, you know, from from my family's value, it's like you can't just erase everything, that made a neighborhood what it is to make room for something that doesn't really connect to that, without eventually then losing that as well. It's all about building on top of that, so that way you can continue to bring forth all the things um, that are rich, and then
Exactly.
taking that into the next elevation of whatever is happening. And there's always ways to do that. I mean, that's the artistic process.
Yeah.
Is like, how do we preserve this and build this and make sure that we're providing a platform to build something even better further on down the road.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And that's, I mean, this is definitely not taking us off the interview, because that was why I had the event there. It was kind of an experiment for me. Like I wanted to see what would happen. Like I think that going from the Squilla, which has a huge legacy, closing in 2017, 4 years of, you know, this whole transition happening, and then going back, I think the first time needed to be very nurtured and, kind of like let people talk about what happened. And so for the next event, I feel like it could be a lot more inclusive for people who want to learn about the murals, about the neighborhood, and about things that they may not know about it. So that is really, that's the goal of that event. What you just said, this bringing in diversity, because I feel like I wanted to see how nurture and how I wanted to see how that dialogue was going to go actually between the people that used to be there and the people that are there. I wanted to just kind of see how that would go. And really, I think that the artists, all of you that were there, brought such a different angle to it. So it wasn't all about, geez, this is gentrified. We feel really left out, although that feeling is very strong and does not need to be ignored. There was just this beauty and richness and protection actually surrounding it, with the artists being there,
Yeah, it really
because,
fun.
well, because, and like, it reminds me of like your project. Okay, so what you're doing, your projects, I should say, because I have a feeling they all have kind of like this bigger vision to them. um so I feel like it's almost like, instead of worrying about all this stuff, why don't we just create the future we want, instead of like sitting there going, oh no, plants are going away, or all this stuff is happening. Why not just make that so visually clear that we create that for our future? And I feel like that's what your projects are doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where the concept of narrative comes into play, because, we're not only talking about like different cultural, like different heritages culturally, but we're talking about like different cultures in mindset, right? What is important to a community doesn't necessarily always have something to do with ethnicity. It's how a group of people, regardless of ethnic background, have come together to create this new thing.
Hmm.
And so if you have disparate views, a lot of times it gets kind of thrown back to the ethnic part of it, but it's more just trying to find the language that both groups can speak, that speak to that common objective, right? And so if you're coming from a place where you feel like you're being oppressed for various reasons, whether it be ethnically, economically, um, and then you're trying to have a conversation with somebody who feels like they're being progressive and open-minded, and you're still not quite understanding each other, that leaves a lot of space to create a new dialogue with new language, new vocabulary,
Hmm.
to create a completely new type of community where those ideals get along.
Yeah.
you know.
And so that's really hope. That's what I'm hoping to do with this event, to create the space for that,
Hmm.
create the actual physical space for that to happen. And, if it's right now, if it's once a year at Nurture Denver, that's cool. Um, and it could be anywhere. It's just the idea of having that space for that uncomfortable
Yeah.
conversation to happen, and then eventually transform when
Yes.
people feel more comfortable together, or maybe they don't even feel comfortable together, but they're like, we want to create something new, so we're going to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, that's it's a challenging road,
Hmm.
because basically what we're talking about is figuring out a way to engage people to think differently.
Right.
And asking
And to
people to think differently is, I mean, that's what the whole world wants, right? We want to
maybe.
try to help people think differently so that we can create solutions instead of more problems and more roadblocks.
Hmm. Yeah. I wanted to learn a little bit before we end our talk today about what brought you into being a muralist, and a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, like my biographical background is I was born in Santa Fe, New Mexico. My father was military. My mother was a creative. She was a custom clothing designer and a seamstress. And we bounced around a lot because of my dad's military background. And he became, after he left, the director of the National Cemetery. So we lived in cemeteries my whole childhood.
Whoa.
Yeah, I had these enormous, like, veteran cemeteries as my backyard, and these big old houses that they put on site so that my dad would, always be there and making sure that everything ran smoothly. And he oversaw, all of the ceremonies that happened there. If anybody who's watching has ever seen, veteran funerals, they're very elaborate, and uh, they elevate, both the country and the individuals who served. And so I got to see all those firsthand and watch the rifle shooting and everything. And then my mom always had her own business. She also managed hotels while we were out there. And then we ended up moving out to the East Coast, living in South Carolina. And that's when my parents split. My dad moved to Florida. My mom moved to Colorado. And from about 10 years old, I was half the year with my mom, half the year with my dad, and just kept making, art that I kind of started when I was early. I just kind of naturally, you know, did things like sketching and coloring and things like that. And then by the time I was about 11 years old, I started taking art classes, drawing, painting, ink, and calligraphy. And then just kept up with that all the way up through high school. Um, you know, won some awards in high school for some of the artwork that I had done, and then I went to the Art Institute of Colorado. And that's where I, kind of made the commitment to start my art career. Spent a couple of years there getting my associate, and then ended up going over to Metropolitan State University of Denver to study under Carlos Fresquez, who
Right.
was the head of the art department there and the painting department, and also was starting a brand new mural program. And so once I found that out, I was in. I interviewed him. He said he would love to have me come on, and the very first classes that he offered, I was in there with all my classmates and painting murals. So I just never stopped ever since then. I painted murals all 4 years of school there, and then I just kept going when I was done. So
Wow.
I've been painting in Denver since 2000. Well, even before I graduated, like 2010, I started painting murals here, and then I've been mostly working in Colorado, but lived in Hawaii for about 4 years and did some work out there and bounced around the country doing various projects over the years as well. But now I'm here. Now I'm back in Denver, and Denver's been such a great hub for me to, build my artistic career. And now that I have the Dream Lab with my, dream space, I'm here for the long haul.
That is awesome. Yeah, you're super inspiring. And I think all of your travels, being in the cemetery and so much ceremony, and also that yin energy there, like I'm sure that that has contributed so much to your just to your ability to transform spaces, really. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
it's always kind of been like that. I've always, grown up in these like very different and unusual spaces, whether it was like a mansion in Raleigh, built, at the turn of the century that we lived in, or whether it was like these southern homes at the cemeteries in South Carolina where we had these big front porches and southern hospitality and, enormous rooms and entryways. Like I was always running around, trying to make these spaces be my own.
Yeah.
I even transformed one of the rooms into like a ping pong racquetball court when I was like 6.
Wow, that's awesome.
you know, so
Did you paint on the walls?
no, I didn't paint on the walls. I just like dedicated that room to my friends and I like playing this like fully immersive game. We could bounce it off any surface, and we had a bunch of different rules, um, and then always was really big on holidays. I just really wanted to always decorate and transform, each room into its own environment. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's always been something that's been, just part of, the natural evolution of, my childhood. And then, building out spaces as I got older. I always took a lot of care, with my homes, my living environments, my studios, and my gallery spaces to emphasize like a very specific feeling whenever you came into those spaces. And
Hmm.
over the years I just got better and better at it, being able to kind of have a vision and execute that in a way where people, when they walked in, were really excited to be in those spaces. And this space that I'm in now is no exception. I mean, from the ground up, this thing is beautiful, and I'm really proud of what we've done here and what we're going to be doing in the next 5 to 10 years here.
Wow, I am really excited to come look at that space and your other art project as well. So I want to say thank you so much for all the contributions you're making and the beauty you're creating in Denver. I love that. I'm from here, and so I love that you're creating so much beauty in Denver.
You're a native. You were born here?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Hmm. Yep.
There's not so many of you around, or at least I don't run into,
That's
Denver
what they
as
say,
much as
but
I wish I should. Yeah.
that's what they say, but I haven't I don't know any of us that have really left, even if they left for a little while, they always came back.